Nobody ever warned you about this, did they? You did the work, you confronted your shadow, you meditated, you devoured the books, you navigated the dark night of the soul. You had the insights, you felt the expansion, and now you're here, on the other side, and you're staring into a void that feels impossible to explain. That emptiness, it's scary because it just doesn't add up. You're supposed to be enlightened, at peace, brimming with purpose and meaning. But instead, everything feels flat. The things that used to bring you joy, they just don't spark the same way anymore. And you start to question everything. Did you do something wrong? Was this whole awakening thing just an illusion? Are you actually regressing? Carl Jung knew about this void, this sense of emptiness, but he never really talked about it directly. He was too busy mapping out the journey to awakening, to really delve into what happens after. This is the part of the story that often goes unspoken, the part nobody wants to admit. The emptiness after awakening, it's real. And now, neuroscience can actually explain why it happens. Today I'm going to reveal what Jung never fully articulated. I'm going to show you what Dr. Anna Lembke explained on the Huberman Lab podcast about the state of dopamine deficit. I'm going to explain why your brain literally can't experience pleasure in the same way anymore. And more importantly, I'm going to give you a roadmap. I'm going to show you what to do when you find yourself in this void, because this isn't the end, it's a transition. And if you understand what's happening, you can navigate it much faster. Let's start with what Jung did say about this emptiness. He was pretty clear about it in his writings. He said, "A person who cannot find their soul will, in the long run, be overcome by feelings of emptiness. They'll crave things in the world that ultimately feel hollow. The answer to this feeling of emptiness," he explained, "is to abandon the desire for external validation and to focus on one's own psyche, one's own soul. That makes sense when you're on the path to awakening. You stop seeking fulfillment in the external world. You look inward. You find your soul." But here's the part that Jung didn't quite spell out. What happens when you find your soul and you still feel empty? There's a crucial difference between two kinds of emptiness. The first is the emptiness of someone who's never looked within. This emptiness is a hunger, a desperate search for something to fill a void. People in this state accumulate things, experiences, relationships, achievements, trying to fill a hole that never seems to be satisfied. This is the emptiness that Jung described. But there's a second kind of emptiness. The emptiness of someone who has looked inward, who has found something, and now realizes that the external world has lost its luster. This emptiness isn't hunger, it's satiation. It's the emptiness of someone who's eaten too much and can't even imagine being hungry again. It's the emptiness of someone who's seen too much and can't be easily impressed. This is the emptiness after the awakening. Neuroscience can now explain this second type of emptiness with almost unsettling precision. Dr. Anna Lembke, a professor at Stanford and an expert on addiction, explained this on the Huberman Lab in a way that changes everything. She said that one of the most interesting discoveries in neuroscience over the last 75 years is that pleasure and pain are co-located in the brain. The same parts of the brain that process pleasure also process pain. And they function like opposite sides of a balance scale. When you do something pleasurable that releases a lot of dopamine, your brain immediately compensates. It reduces dopamine receptors, it decreases transmission, and this causes a temporary dip below the baseline. This dip is what you experience as the emptiness after pleasure, the day after a big accomplishment, the Monday after an amazing weekend, the post-vacation blues. But hold on to that information, because I'm going to come back to it later, because what happens during a spiritual awakening is even more profound. During the awakening, you experienced intense states of consciousness, moments of deep connection, insights that seemed to come from another dimension, sensations of unity with everything. These states are neurologically equivalent to massive spikes in dopamine. Your brain was in overdrive, and each spike was followed by a compensation. Dr. Lembke explained that if you keep chasing these spikes repeatedly, you reset your brain to a state of anhedonia, a state of dopamine deficit. The balance scale becomes permanently tilted towards the side of pain, and you lose the ability to experience pleasure in normal things. This is exactly what happens after an intense awakening. You've experienced states so elevated that normal states now seem empty in comparison, not because something is wrong with you, but because your brain has adapted to a new, unsustainable pattern, and that pattern cannot be maintained indefinitely. Jung spoke about this in a different way. He said, "We add to ourselves a clear and a dark, and more light means more night." Any gain in light of consciousness requires or invites a compensatory aspect of dark night. The ego is initially surrendered but also required to endure because of the integration. The broader horizons of the individuation process cannot be reached without descent. The emptiness after awakening is that descent. It's the neurological and psychological compensation for states of expanded consciousness. It's the night that follows the day. It's the receding tide after the wave. Now let me go back to that point I asked you to remember. Dr. Lembke said something crucial about how long it takes for the brain to reset. She said that 30 days is, in her clinical experience, the average time it takes for the brain to reset reward pathways and for dopamine transmission to regenerate. And there's also scientific evidence to back this up. Imaging studies show that brains are still in a state of dopamine deficit 2 weeks after stopping drug use. One study found that depressed men addicted to alcohol, after 4 weeks without access to alcohol, 80% no longer met the criteria for major depression. During the first 10 days, it's expected to feel worse before you feel better. Most people feel worse for 2 weeks. But if they can make it through the first 2 weeks, improvement starts in the 3rd week. By the 4th week, most people are feeling significantly better than they were before they stopped. This applies directly to the emptiness after awakening. If you stop chasing states of elevated consciousness compulsively, if you allow your brain to re-equilibrate, the emptiness starts to diminish around 30 days. It doesn't disappear completely, but it becomes bearable, manageable, and eventually transformative. But here's something else that Dr. Lembke said that's deeply relevant. What people in recovery from addiction often talk about is, to some extent, having to learn to live with things being a little boring most of the time. Okay, nobody warned you about this. You did the work. You wrestled with your shadow self. You meditated. You devoured the books. You navigated the dark night of the soul. You had the epiphanies. You felt the expansion. And now you're here on the other side, and you feel a void that you can't quite put your finger on. It's like staring into an abyss after climbing the highest mountain. This emptiness is terrifying because it doesn't make sense. You should be enlightened. You should be at peace. You should be overflowing with purpose and meaning. But instead, everything feels flat, washed out. The things that used to spark joy, they just don't hit the same anymore. And you're left wondering, did you do something wrong? Was the awakening a sham? Are you backsliding? This is especially hard to hear for those who have experienced expanded states of consciousness. You tasted the extraordinary, and now you have to live in the ordinary. The ordinary seems gray in comparison. It feels like a prison after you've flown free. Carl Jung understood this. He said that the dark night of the soul is more than depression or grief. It's a psychological and spiritual dismantling that occurs when our old ways of being no longer serve us. He believed that this descent into darkness isn't just inevitable for some, but also essential for true self-realization. The emptiness after awakening isn't a mistake. It's not a regression. It's a necessary phase of the process. It's the period when your brain is recalibrating. It's the period when your psyche is integrating what it has experienced. It's the period when you learn to live in a new way. There's a crucial difference between the post-awakening void and clinical depression. In depression, there's a sense of stagnation. Nothing seems to have meaning. Nothing seems to have purpose. In the dark night of the soul, which includes the post-awakening void, the pain has an evolutionary significance. There's a sense that something bigger is happening. Even in the emptiness, there's an intuition that this is a passage, not a destiny. If you're in the void and feel that nothing matters, that nothing makes sense, without any intuition that this is transient, seek professional help. Clinical depression is a serious condition that may require medical treatment. But if you're in the void and, somewhere deep down, you know that this is part of something larger, keep reading. Carl Jung went through his own void. In 1913, after his break with Freud, he found himself outside the club, adrift, without a career goal or path. He was lost in a way that few understood, but it was exactly in this period that he did his deepest work. Active imagination, the understanding of the unconscious, the integration of the shadow, the process of individuation. It all came through the dark night of his soul. In his work, Jung rediscovers his soul and speaks with it. This encounter is significant because he had abandoned his soul for so long. He was too focused on everyday life. After a long time, the disconnection with himself became obvious, and the reconciliation with himself filled him with happiness and meaning. This is what's on the other side of the void. Not a return to old pleasures, not a return to the old way of living, but a new way of relating to yourself, a deeper connection with your own soul, a meaning that doesn't depend on dopamine spikes. Neuroscience confirms this in another way. There's a concept called anhedonia. The word comes from Greek and means without pleasure. Sufferers find themselves unable to experience pleasure or feel their experience of pleasure significantly reduced. Anhedonia has a physical element. Reduced activity in the ventral striatum of the brain, which relates to motivation and reward, can be seen, along with an imbalance of neurotransmitters like dopamine. But here's something fascinating. While there is a correlation between anhedonia and major depressive disorder, not all sufferers of depression experience anhedonia, and not all sufferers of anhedonia suffer from depression. The post-awakening void can include anhedonia without being depression. You may be unable to feel pleasure in the things that used to work. Without being clinically depressed, your brain is in transition. Your dopamine receptors are recalibrating, and this takes time. Now I'm going to give you something practical. What to do when you're in the post-awakening void. First, stop trying to fix it. The void isn't a problem to be solved. It's a process to be moved through. Every time you try to escape the void by seeking another pleasure spike, you prolong the recalibration process. The brain needs time without spikes to reset. Allow the void. Second, understand the timeline. Dr. Anna Lembke has talked about 30 days to reset reward pathways, but the spiritual void can take longer. Months, sometimes years. This isn't to discourage you. It's to give you realistic expectations. If you expect to get out of the void in a week, you'll be frustrated. If you understand that this is a process of months, you can relax into it. Third, practice what Huberman refers to as baseline protocols: quality sleep, regular exercise, exposure to sunlight in the morning, proper nutrition. These things won't get you out of the void immediately, but they'll create the conditions for your brain to recalibrate in a healthy way. Fourth, avoid super pleasures. No compulsive social media, no hyperpalatable food, no pornography, no substances. Each of these things creates dopamine spikes that prolong the deficit state. The simpler your pleasures, the faster the recalibration. Fifth, find meaning in the ordinary. This is the hardest, but it's the most important. Carl Jung said that after finding the soul, everyday life must be lived differently, not seeking peaks, but finding depth in the simple. A walk, a conversation, a meal. When you stop comparing the ordinary to the extraordinary you experienced, the ordinary begins to reveal its own beauty. Sixth, continue the practices, but with lightness, meditation, journaling, contemplation. These practices remain important, but in the void, they shouldn't be done seeking elevated states. They should be done as anchors, as ways to be present in the ordinary without escaping it. Seventh, be patient with relationships. People who haven't gone through an awakening won't understand your void. They may think you're depressed. They may want to cheer you up. They may not know how to help you. This is normal. You don't need them to understand. You just need to continue connecting, even when the connection seems flat. Eighth, use the body as an anchor. Huberman constantly emphasizes the role of the body in regulating mental state. Regular physical exercise not only helps to recalibrate dopamine, but also releases endorphins that counterbalance anhedonia. Long walks, swimming, yoga, anything that puts your body in motion helps the brain exit the deficit state. Ninth, practice gratitude in a structured way. This may seem cliché, but the neuroscience behind it is solid. Gratitude practices activate the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and release dopamine and serotonin, not forced gratitude, not mechanical lists, but a genuine pause to notice what still works, what is still present, what still sustains your existence. 10th, accept that pleasure will return in a different form. You won't go back to feeling pleasure the same way you did before. This isn't loss, it's evolution. Post-awakening pleasure is more subtle, more profound, less dependent on intense stimuli, more available in the ordinary. And when you stop expecting that old pleasure, a new pleasure starts to reveal itself. There's something few people talk about regarding the post-awakening void. It has phases. It's not a uniform block of apathy. It oscillates. There are better days and worse days, moments of hope and moments of despair. Recognizing these phases helps you avoid over-identifying with any of them. The initial phase is often the most intense. It's when the contrast between the elevated states and your current state is the most glaring. Everything seems to have lost its color. Nothing excites you. Nothing motivates you. This phase can last for weeks. The intermediate phase brings moments of relief. You start to get little glimpses that pleasure still exists, a meal that has flavor, a conversation that has connection, a moment of beauty that penetrates the void. These moments are important. They are signs that recalibration is happening. The late phase is integration. The void doesn't disappear completely, but it becomes bearable. You learn to function with it. You learn to find meaning despite it. And eventually, you realize that the void was a teacher. It was teaching you to live in a way that doesn't depend on peaks. There's something else I need to tell you. The void isn't just neurological. It's also psychological and spiritual. It's the period in which you're learning to live without the illusions that sustained your previous life. Before the awakening, you probably derived identity from external things, your career, your relationships, your achievements, your possessions. The awakening removed these sources of identity, showed that they were illusory, and now you're naked, Without the clothes you used to wear, this identity void is part of the process. You are learning to exist without defining yourself by external things. This is liberating in the long run, but in the short term, it's terrifying. You look at yourself and don't know who you are anymore. Carl Jung called this ego death, the old self, with its attachments, beliefs, and desires, must die to make way for a new, more integrated self. This process isn't different from Carl Jung's concept of individuation, which involves a confrontation with the unconscious and the shadow self. As Jung himself has written extensively, facing this shadow is paramount. The void is the space between the old self and the new self. It's the hallway between two rooms. It's the tunnel between two mountains. You're not in the old place anymore. You haven't arrived at the new one yet, and being in the middle is uncomfortable, but the middle is where the transformation happens. Not at the extremes, not at the peaks. In the void, in the ordinary, in the plain. It's there that the new you is forming, silently, without fanfare, without mystical experiences, just existing, just being. There's a Zen saying that speaks to this: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The void is the moment when you realize that enlightenment doesn't exempt you from ordinary life. It brings you back to it, but in a completely different way. Ordinary life before the awakening was a prison. You were trapped in it without knowing there was something else. Ordinary life after the awakening is a choice. You've seen the extraordinary, and now you choose to live in the ordinary, not because you have no option, but because you've realized that the ordinary is the extraordinary in disguise. Huberman Lab talks about something that relates directly to this. He mentions that dopamine isn't about having pleasure. It's about wanting. It's about motivation and the desire to pursue something. When your dopamine levels are low, you don't just feel less pleasure. You feel less willing to do anything. The motivation disappears along with the pleasure. This explains why the post-awakening void often comes accompanied by a paralysis of action. You know what you should do, but you can't move. It's not laziness, it's neurobiology. Your brain is in a state that literally makes action difficult. And forcing action in this state can prolong the deficit. The solution, paradoxically, is to accept the temporary inaction. Don't punish yourself for not being productive. Don't compare yourself to who you were before. Allow the body the rest it needs to recalibrate. When dopamine levels start to normalize, the motivation returns. Not forced, natural. There's a common trap at this point. People in the void often try to get out of it by doing exactly what put them there. Seeking more intense spiritual experiences, more deep meditations, more retreats, more books, more practices. This is like an addict trying to get out of a hangover by using more of the substance. It works temporarily, but deepens the deficit in the long run. The way out of the void is through it, not around, not over, through. And that means sitting in the discomfort. It means tolerating the lack of pleasure. It means continuing to live even when living seems meaningless. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He said that the silence and the emptiness can seem overwhelming, leading many to question if they will find their way back to the light. Still, the paradox of the dark night is that it's often in these moments of deepest despair that the psyche is undergoing its greatest transformation. The darkness is not a sign of failure or abandonment. It's a necessary part of the process of becoming. This is the paradox that the void teaches you. There aren't two worlds, the elevated world of mystical experiences and the flat world of everyday life. There's only one world, and your perception of it changes based on the state of your brain and your consciousness. When you come out of the void, you don't go to a different place. You see the same place with different eyes. The ordinary reveals depths that you didn't realize. The simple shows complexities that you ignored. The flat gains texture. You've come this far. You now understand something that few understand. The void after awakening is not a mistake. It's not a regression. It's not a sign that you did anything wrong. It's a necessary phase of the transformation process. It's your brain recalibrating after intense peaks. It's your psyche integrating profound experiences. And it's you learning to live in a new way. There's a perspective that can completely change how you see this void. In Western culture, emptiness is seen as negative, something to be filled, something to be avoided. But in Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism, emptiness, or sunyata, is seen completely differently. Emptiness represents seeing through the illusion of the independent nature of the self. It's liberation, not prison. Maybe the emptiness you're experiencing isn't the absence of something good. Maybe it's the presence of something deeper, the absence of illusions that once filled your life, the absence of attachments that once defined your identity, the absence of distraction that once prevented you from seeing clearly. Carl Jung had a phrase that applies perfectly here. He said that who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. That feeling of emptiness and that moment when you stopped daydreaming about the external world and started to really awaken to your internal world. The internal world initially and feels empty because you haven't learned to see it yet. Neuroscience has a related concept, the default mode network, or DMN, is the brain network that's active when we're not focused on external tasks. It's where self-reflection, planning, and rumination happen. During mystical experiences, the DMN often decreases its activity. You stop thinking about yourself, and that's liberating. But then, when the DMN returns to normal function, it encounters different terrain. The old narratives about who you are don't work anymore. The old worries seem irrelevant, and the DMN, trying to do its job of creating a coherent narrative about you, finds a void. There's no material to work with. The old stories have been unmasked. This is temporary. Over time, new narratives emerge, new ways of understanding yourself, new meanings form. But while that's happening, there's the emptiness, the gap between the old story and the new, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. Andrew Huberman mentions the importance of what he calls spiritual grounding as one of the 8 foundational pillars of health. He recognizes that human beings need something beyond the physical. They need connection with something larger. And the post-awakening void is often the moment when that connection needs to be rebuilt in a more mature way, less based on experiences, more based on continuous presence. There's an interesting phenomenon that happens with people who go through the void and come out the other side. They develop a unique resilience because they've experienced the loss of everything they thought was important and survived because they faced the absolute emptiness and were not destroyed. This creates a profound confidence, not the noisy confidence of the ego, but the silent confidence of someone who knows they can withstand anything. Carl Jung said that a tree cannot grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The void is the hell, and your roots are deepening there. When you emerge, you'll be more rooted, more stable, more capable of growing even higher. Carl Jung never quite spelled it out, maybe because he himself was still processing it, or maybe he knew that some things can only be understood by those who experience them. The void is one of those things. You can't understand the void by reading about it. You only understand the void by going through it, And if you're going through it now, know that you are not alone. Countless seekers before you have passed through this same void and come out of it transformed, not better in the sense of happier, but more real, more integrated, more capable of living without depending on peaks of any kind. The question now is simple. Are you going to resist the void? Or are you going to go through it? Are you going to try to escape? Or are you going to allow it? Are you going to seek another peak? Or are you going to let your brain recalibrate? The void is not your enemy. It's your severest teacher. Teaching lessons that no mystical experience can teach. Teaching patience. Teaching humility. Teaching that you are more than your emotional states. More than your pleasure peaks. More than your experiences. When you finally come out of the void, you're not the same person who went in. You're someone who's passed through the fire and hasn't been consumed. Someone who's faced the nothingness and discovered that there's still something. That something is you, not the you that you thought you were, but the you that always was, hidden behind all the masks and illusions. The answer only you can give. But whatever your choice, know that the void is not permanent. It passes. And what comes after is worth the journey. This knowledge that I've shared took years of research to gather. Carl Jung, neuroscience, Andrew Huberman, contemplative traditions, all connected to give you an understanding that few possess. If you felt the value of this, consider supporting through super thanks. Each support is you saying, continue revealing these connections, continue uniting ancient wisdom with modern science. You're not just a spectator. You're part of this mission of collective awakening. Now tell me in the comments, are you going through the post-awakening void now? What has it been like for you? What has helped you to go through it? I want to hear your experience, because every story shared illuminates the path for others who are starting this phase of the journey.